Hello, and welcome to Doctor Who 50 years ago. This week, the third thrilling instalment of David Whittaker's Power of the Daleks. I am Ben.
I'm Luke.
And I'm Nick.
And here we go into the news. On November 13th, 1966, boom! Israeli tanks attacked 3 towns 2 miles inside of Jordan. And following that, a battle ensued before the Israelis returned to their territory, having proven a point.
Would that news have meant that much in the context of the Cold War going on? The fact that battles were happening off every day, this is just attacking 3 towns and then going back again.
It's a show of strength, definitely, which is definitely not what the Middle East wanted right now.
Yeah, and I guess you have to think this is pretty relevant to now because although not as bad as it happens that often in, let's say, Israel, it still occurs. So this probably would have been a massive news story, as any time Israel bombs a neighbouring country or the West Bank.
Yeah, and I mainly included it because it's one of the many skirmishes preluding the Six-Day War next year. Meanwhile, in the land of Hollywood, November 14th, Mr. Jack Warner of the Warner Brothers sold his 1/3 interest in the company to a Toronto-based distributor of films for television. Essentially, it's sort of the end of the old guard, maybe, and the beginning of the new.
Films at this point were still the sort of, I don't care if it's good, I just care if it's on Tuesday. I mean, I remember that the editing in this era was made so uniform just to make sure that all films look the same. Like, there were all these Robin Hood films from the time, and they all look and have the same pace. So I wouldn't say that this is some big change in the guard.
On November 15th, Gemini 12 splashed down, hopefully in some sea, and that makes its way for the Apollo manned programs. So it's the final precursor to the space age and the space race reaching its conclusion.
This is when they're starting to say, it's time to go. There's a trust forming in technology that it is going to push us into the next decade, and that rather than being something to fear and worry about, it's this brilliant thing that everyone likes.
Especially space technology.
Woody Allen, who on November 17th launched his first full-length play on Broadway, entitled Don't Drink the Water. I can only assume that's culturally significant.
Because it's Woody Allen.
Because it's Woody Allen.
Yeah, he wouldn't get massively going until the 70s.
No.
But it's definitely his first big thing, especially since it's on Broadway.
I guess it's just a point of interest.
Yeah.
November 18th, Major William Knight flew the North American X-15 plane, fighter jet, whatever it is, to a record speed of Mach 6.33, which is 4,250 miles an hour. And if you're American, please convert it into kilometres here. He covered 637 miles in 9 minutes.
Yes.
You can imagine that this would have been research into spy planes to send over the Soviet Union. Can't you? So this is all about the Cold War,
It
really.
might have been, yeah.
But it's a sign that the Cold War is driving innovation in technology.
War always drives innovation in technology.
Yeah, well, I mean, the space race was an outcropping of the Cold War, so... But yes, thank you, Soviet Union and America, for having a war that you didn't fight, but almost did.
Yeah.
And finally, on November 19th, a planned invasion of Haiti by several hundred well-armed exiles was halted at the last moment by an intervention from the US government. They were prepared to overthrow that dictator, Francois Duvalier, although they stopped that because their plan was to convert Haiti into a base for Cuban exile operations against Castro and his Cuba. And we all know what happened last time they tried to do that.
Yes.
So, the planned invasion, was that planned by the Americans?
It's more that it had the backing and ultimately it seems that they had enough of a say to halt the invasion.
So there isn't really anything different going on. This would be pretty normal even now, if you found out the CIA had their fingers in some country in Africa, or South America now, and they stopped a planned invasion or caused a planned invasion or coup. You wouldn't be that surprised. In the last 50, 60 years,
No.
several
Yeah.
coup d'etat have been caused by CIA intervention. So, I mean, I can't imagine this would have been in the news very much, though.
No, I really wouldn't think so.
This is the sort of thing that only gets revealed 30 or 40 years after the...
And with a lot of bureaucracy to stop it from happening.
Yeah, lots of freedom of
between.
information requests.
And the like. And that was the news. So there you are. And now we can go into Power of the Daleks episode 3. What are our thoughts on the episode?
This is when we start to see it as more of a sci-fi story. It is very traditional Doctor Who at this point. Well, I say traditional, this is what the Troughton era would become, this sort of episode. We have found the people at the top of the food chain, and there are some evil monsters trying to overthrow a colony. We're finally figuring out who it is. Let's move to stop them.
Here, it's more like the siege is coming from within, as opposed to from the outside. Like in later ones. That's what this is why I think Power of the Daleks is so interesting, is that the enemy is within as opposed to from the outside. And I found this one was very atmospheric and very chilling, especially the beginning. The resolution to the cliffhanger isn't so much a resolution as more the Daleks look at the Doctor and they can't say that, he can't properly say, "I'm your servant." And that is a great moment. And then it just throughout, the music is amazing. And they've really built the atmosphere so well. There's a lot of tension going on. And you are actually concerned for the colony, even if you don't necessarily like some of the people that you're seeing there, because they have bad motivations and they're very flawed characters. You're still interested overall in what's going to happen next.
This is a very thrilling, intense build-up of the proceedings. I've said this many times before, and I can still say it again because it's doing it so well. As you say, there's a very interesting subversion of, instead of the enemies from the outside, it's the enemies from the inside, giving the enemies of the outside the ability to destroy them all. And it's wonderful.
It shows how smart the Daleks are, and they can be embroiled. They can embroil someone within their plan without them even knowing it.
As they do with Lesterson here.
Indeed.
The humans love the Daleks because, quite literally, they could boost their economy and make their colony not the mess that it is under their rule. It's the perfect panacea, and obviously, the Doctor knows that this is indeed the recipe for disaster, and gives a wonderful undertoned "I shall stop you" line, which is a brilliant entrance for his Doctor. Really, says everything about him, I think.
Yeah, I think actually Troughton's Doctor each episode is getting better, and this one it really firmly establishes. I think that he's less humorous in this episode than he has been in the previous two, and this is more the kind of Doctor that he will be throughout his entire run, as opposed to the. I know he's the cosmic hobo, but that's not as important in this episode as it was in the first two. Let's say
these moments of humour are used to show that he's trying to, at best, distract himself from the terrifying events that are happening, because he knows it's happening. He knows he's got to stop it, but he can't yet, and he's desperately trying to think it out, using humour in the process.
We know that it reasons in this distrustful, horrible way, and it shows there that the scientist is so glad for his breakthrough, he doesn't stop to think about what it could mean.
Yeah, all the consequences it can entitle. He just sees the benefits, and to him those benefits outweigh the costs, even to the point where he doesn't even see the cost of, it has hurt your scientist last episode. Have you checked up on him? No. Well done, you're putting human lives.
Yeah, it shows Lesterson is shown to be very naive throughout this entire episode. I think he's so concerned with just discovery of new things, yeah, as you said, he just doesn't care about anything else. I would almost argue that the message of this is you can have scientists, but they need to have oversight, which they're not getting here.
So the murder mystery ends, or at least the mystery surrounding Quinn and his actions. Obviously, it was a ploy for him to become the governor, because he can then be in charge of the rebels. And so Bragan, who's quite clearly not in charge of the rebels, of course not, has Henson where he wants him and commits to a power play and becomes deputy governor, from which he can do his malignant deeds. I won't say evil, because they're all malignant and morally corrupt, but there we are.
I think what's interesting about that little bit is that since you're still in that detective mindset, my first thought was, so this is what Bragan stands to gain. And it shows how brilliant it was last episode, that it really got you into that murder mystery mindset, that you're thinking, so that was his motive and his plan all along. What did he stand to gain? So it's a good resolution.
And the answer was power, because he's with the rebels. And the rebels most definitely do not want Hansel there. The Doctor, meanwhile, fiddles with a device that will hopefully interfere with the Daleks, whilst Ben and Polly, as the audience, ask him questions about how they can defeat the Daleks. So, off the Doctor goes to Lesterson's lab, where the Dalek is being tested with various scientific facts and figures and thingamabobs. And the Doctor ingratiates himself into Lesterson's better moods, because currently he's the happiest kid in the happiest candy store, because he's getting to play with his new scientific toy, the Dalek. And the Doctor uses it to his advantage in trying to disrupt or destroy the Dalek with his electrical short-circuit device thing. It doesn't work, and the Doctor gets kicked out. Whilst he's doing all this bits and pieces, Ben and Polly go looking for the Doctor, who rushed off without them, and the whole split-up technique happens, and Polly immediately gets kidnapped by Janley, the rebels, because they've got Hensel out the way. They've got essentially power of the colony now. But the only thing stopping them from gaining complete control is they could use the Daleks, especially their weapons, which have been seen to be proven effective last episode, and that will establish firm power over their revolution. And the only thing stopping them using the Daleks is the Examiner, the Doctor. So how do we get him out of the way? Oh, I know. Let's get rid of one of his companions.
In this bit, there's I don't know what Janley's cohort is called, but Valmar. But they have that little bit where they say, "We shall take over the colony with this," and they hold up the dismembered Dalek gun. And I thought it was interesting that there's a real fear surrounding the gun, even though it's not connected to anything. And that shows how spooky the Daleks are in this episode.
And how symbolic they are.
Exactly.
Like, you don't need the entire Dalek, you just need one appendage, albeit the most appalling appendage, but there we are.
I think, again, it furthers this theory that I've been putting across, how science of itself can be a force for good, but here it's being corrupted for nefarious ends, and the Doctor, as the Examiner, it needs to stop this from happening, to give oversight and say that no, that's a terrible idea to use a Dalek gun for weaponry, because the Daleks are going to kill you if you try and use them as weapons.
And there's this other idea that we can control that which obviously can't be controlled and use it for our own ends.
Yeah, that's very much a human naivety there. Throughout history, history is littered with examples of various people trying to control, as you said, the uncontrollable.
The conniving of the Daleks is seen when they gain their foothold over Lesterson, almost slipping up with a Dalek is bet, not the same as a human.
That's a real number 2 there,
Yeah.
which is a very hilarious way of saying it, but I'm in fact referring to the Ark. There's a bit in the Ark where one of the monoids, which is the aliens, say, "We are going to kill," and one of the companions says, "You were going to say something bad about us, weren't you?" And the monoid, I quote, says, no."
If you haven't seen the Ark, especially the Ark episode 3, I would thoroughly recommend it.
It's a whopper, ladies and gentlemen. It really is.
Yes.
But here it is used not for comedic effect, as
No.
unfortunately it is used in the Ark. But
Well, I don't
it's
even know
used-
if in the Ark it was purposely meant to be comedic. It just ends up being
it ends
comedic.
up being comedic for
Here-
the episode that it
Here, though,
is.
because it's a Dalek and the music is all very tense and menacing, it works.
It is a complete counter to it. Yeah.
I still couldn't get into it. It seemed too... It didn't have the same plotting nature that I expect from a Dalek.
I think it's probably there for the kids more than anything else,
That's
the young children. Because actually, think about a 5-year-old watching this. This is actually quite a complicated story.
Yeah, I'll soon get to that bit, because that's a point that I really love about this episode, is that it's so complicated, but you can follow it so well. So whilst Lesterson is off getting stuff for the Daleks, because they've promised him everything that they can do. We can build computers that are perfect. Just give us power, please. Oh, all right then. So the Daleks get their power, quite literally. The Doctor bursts in the middle of this, tries to turn down the power. Unfortunately, he's met by Daleks with guns, and so he knows that he's in deep trouble.
That reveal of them with the guns came at the perfect moment, because he says at that point, "Don't be frightened of it, Ben. It's not armed." And by this point, we're thinking, "Oh, it's a lone Dalek. It hasn't got its gun. What is it?" Then, at the perfect moment, the two with weapons come out.
Because they've got the power now.
The stakes are raised again. This is no longer a solitary Dalek. This is a Dalek force that we are seeing strong for the first time. It's no longer just this poor Dalek.
Yeah, so the Doctor's day isn't going well, and so he tries to reason with the humans one last time, including Lesterson. But unfortunately, Lesterson thinks he has a foothold over the Daleks, and ultimately that is his failure, because the Daleks have a foothold over him. Hensel gives Lesterson all the power he wants before he leaves to do colony things. Inadequately, I no doubt. Bragan is left in charge, so the Bragan and the Rebels are able to use both the Doctor and the Lesterson and the Daleks to their advantage, whilst the Daleks use all the humans bar the Doctor to their advantage. It is quite literally the most complex and thrilling power play in Doctor Who history, and the Doctor sums it up beautifully when he goes back into his room and goes, "It's just greed and ambition. And it's all going to go wrong. It's good. It's so good." So the Doctor's problems increase further when Bragan immediately goes after him and says, "You're not the Examiner, are you? We found a dead Examiner in the swamp." But Bragan's an idiot, because the only person who knows about the dead Examiner is the Doctor and the murderer. So here's a new murder mystery resolution. Agatha Christie would be proud. So
And of course, that's all set up in the first episode when you know only one person is there to kill, because you see the Examiner killed on screen.
yeah,
So-
and you see the butt of Bragan. So it ends up with Bragan saying, "Don't say anything, or I will take you down with me," essentially. And then the Doctor's problems increase even further because Bragan has Polly. So he has a weapon to use against the Doctor. A kidnapped weapon, but there we are. And finally, because they can't do anything with leaving the Daleks alone, Lesterson now has the power. Now has given the Daleks the power, and the Daleks converse excitedly. "We will get our power because Lesterson's a gullible idiot whose self-interests will serve to kill everyone." And Lesterson watches appalled as the noose tightens around the colony of Vulcan, all because they gave power to the Daleks.
There are two very distinct power plays here. You have the Lesterson believing in technology, and you have the Daleks not caring about Lesterson. Lesterson says things like, what sort of positronic brain must you have? He believes firmly the Dalek just a robot. And as a result, he thinks that it must be there to serve him. He thinks nothing else of it. He trusts technology completely, and even though it is obviously reasoning, as he said before, it never crosses his mind that it might betray him. However, the Daleks chant in front of Lesterson. They care so little about him and care so little about his presence, they essentially reveal their diabolical plan before him. Lesterson believes that the technology is there to serve him, but the technology has left him so far behind that it doesn't even think about him as a presence. And I think that's a very interesting power play between humans and their ability to develop things and how they think technology will make them superior, but in fact, they're still nothing.
It's all ramping up very nicely, as I've said the previous 2 times, and we'll say it for another 2 times, because this story is very well paced, in that you've got the dead Dalek in the end of episode 1, the one Dalek chanting that it is the servant of the humans and gaining power over the humans, or at least the humans' minds, at the end of episode 2, and now you've got 3 Daleks who have been given the assurance that they will get power to obviously get even more Daleks onto their side so they can build up their force to kill everyone at the end of episode 3.
Paul Cornell says that David Whittaker is his favourite Doctor Who writer, and Paul Cornell is very big on pacing and considers it a lot whenever he's writing anything. He says that this episode is an essay in pace and shape writing.
It really is. It's very, very good.
Yeah, every episode, as you've said, ups the stakes. And it feels right and natural.
It will be to the point where we will be drowning in stakes. It really will be.
But and I can see that this will be able to maintain it for 6 parts, as very few classic Who serials could
do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most 6-parters really are kind of feeling quite tired by the end. But this one, we're halfway through exactly, and I'm on the edge of my seat.
There hasn't been a single moment of filler.
No, everything has been necessary. I wouldn't cut anything out of it.
No.
Most classic serials.
Even Patrick Troughton tootling on his pipe.
That's needed. Everything.
Oh yes,
you need Troughton. You need Troughton's moments just to establish his character. Ordinarily,
you need some humour in this tense thriller.
Yeah, you need bits for the kids. You have to imagine, I guess, the Doctor being a bit silly is actually there for the kids.
And if anything, he's using his recorder to dismiss Braken because he knows he's an idiot.
Well, for the kids, you do, because you have to imagine there would be 5-year-olds watching this at the time. This is very complicated, and so
that's the ways that it tells the kid audience that these people are wrong and the Doctor is right.
Yeah, they don't need to necessarily be following the kind of the politics of the colony very well, but all they need to know is the Daleks are using Lesterson for their own bad ends, and that the colonists are all fighting, squabbling over unimportant things compared to the Daleks, and the Doctor is going to stop them.
It boils down to who do you trust more, a pepper pot that screeches or a man who plays a recorder?
Yes.
Doctor Who at its finest, ladies and gentlemen, it really is. And it will continue with episode 4 of Power of the Daleks. Thank you very much for watching. You can find us on Blogspot, which redirects to iTunes. We're also on Facebook and other internety things. Possibly Google+, like I say, but it doesn't really matter because we're not going to look at it. Of course, we're on YouTube, so like, comment and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. I have been Ben.
I have been Luke.
And I have been Nick.
Thank you, and goodbye.